Emma never believed in love. Not after being betrayed. Desperate to escape family pressure, she hires a stranger, Liam, to act as her boyfriend. But as stolen glances turn into undeniable passion, the lines blur. What happens when a fake romance turns dangerously real? And will Emma risk her heart again? A society that defines love by wealth. Emma Carter walked into the grand ballroom of the Lexington Hotel, her heels clicking against the marble floor with confidence she didn't quite feel. The room was alive with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the hum of New York's elite engaging in conversations about their latest business ventures and luxury vacations. Emma had grown up in this world where love was measured by status, where emotions were controlled, and where vulnerability was seen as weakness. And in this world, she was failing miserably. Her mother, Victoria Carter, was an elegant but cold woman who had spent years grooming Emma to be the perfect socialite. But at 28, Emma was still unmarried, which in her mother's eyes was her greatest failure. And then there was Jason Wells, her ex-boyfriend, a man who embodied everything her family wanted for her, but nothing her heart desired. As she walked towards the table where her family was seated, Jason's smirk was the first thing she noticed. He was leaning back, sipping his whiskey like he owned the world. His voice carried through the conversation. Emma. Oh, she's too picky. No man will ever be good enough for her. That's why she's still alone. The words sliced through Emma like a dagger. The people around them chuckled, some casting her pitying glances. She clenched her fists under the table. She wouldn't let Jason humiliate her like this. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and lied through her teeth. Actually, I'm in a relationship. A stunned silence fell over the table. Jason arched an eyebrow, amusement flickering in his eyes. Oh, and where is this mystery man? Her mother folded her arms, skepticism written all over her face. Emma, darling, if you had a boyfriend, we would have met him by now. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced a confident smile. He's been traveling for work, but he'll be at the charity gala next weekend. Jason leaned in, his voice dripping with mockery. Can't wait to meet him. Emma swallowed hard. What had she just done? A chance encounter with a stranger. Emma stormed out of the ballroom, her pulse racing. She needed a boyfriend, a convincing one, and fast. Frustrated, she walked into a quiet bar, a stark contrast to the glittering event she had just left. The scent of whiskey and leather filled the air, the dim lighting casting deep shadows over the patrons. She sat at the counter, running a hand through her dark waves. That's when she saw him. Liam Hayes. He was leaning against the bar, sleeves rolled up, a glass in hand. The golden light reflected off the angles of his sharp jawline, his dark hair tousled in a way that looked effortlessly reckless. He was nothing like the polished men in her world. He was rugged, dangerous-looking, and entirely too captivating. But what really caught her attention was his eyes, a stormy blue-gray that held a story she couldn't quite read. When the bartender walked away, Emma caught sight of a small tattered notebook by Liam's side, filled with numbers, business plans, dreams that seemed out of reach. A man who once had it all, a man trying to rebuild. He looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down. Emma wasn't used to men truly looking at her, not just at her beauty, not just at her wealth, but at her. Liam raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. You've been staring for a while, sweetheart. Do I owe you money? Emma's lips twitched. His voice was smooth, teasing, with just a hint of danger. I need a favor, she said, surprising even herself. Liam leaned in slightly, his gaze never wavering. That depends on the kind of favor. She took a deep breath. I need a fake boyfriend. For one night, I'll pay you. Liam stilled, his smirk faded, replaced by something unreadable. You're joking. I'm completely serious. He leaned back, folding his arms over his chest, studying her. And why exactly does a woman like you need to pay for a boyfriend? Emma hesitated before answering. Because my ex humiliated me in front of my family, and because in my world, it's better to fake happiness than admit loneliness. For a brief second, something flashed in Liam's eyes. Recognition. He exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. You don't even know me. What if I'm a serial killer? Emma smirked. Are you? Liam chuckled, shaking his head. No, sweetheart, but I am expensive. Emma slid a check across the bar, watching his expression as he read the amount. Liam let out a low whistle. That's a lot of money for one night. Then say yes. He hesitated. But something in Emma's gaze, something vulnerable, something real, made his decision for him. Fine, he finally said, taking the check. But on one condition. Emma frowned. What condition? Liam leaned in, his voice a rough whisper against her skin. If we're going to do this, sweetheart, I don't do things halfway. If I'm your boyfriend, I'm going to make sure everyone in that room believes it. A shiver ran down Emma's spine. She had no idea what she had just signed up for. A dangerous agreement. Emma Carter had never done anything this reckless before. As she sat across from Liam Hayes in the dimly lit bar, she couldn't help but notice how casually he leaned against the counter, as if she hadn't just hired him to play the most important role of her life. His fingers lazily drummed against his whiskey glass, and when he finally spoke, his voice was smooth but laced with amusement. So, sweetheart, he murmured, tilting his head. If I'm going to be your boyfriend, I need to know some things about you. Emma folded her arms, trying to maintain control of the situation. Like what? Liam smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. For starters, what kind of boyfriend am I supposed to be? The charming head-over-heels type. The possessive can't keep his hands off you type. He leaned in slightly, his gaze locking onto hers. Or the madly in love type, the kind who looks at you like you're the only woman in the world. Emma's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't fair how easily he slipped into this role, like he was born to be dangerous, to make a woman forget her own name with just a look. She straightened her shoulders, refusing to be affected. You just need to be convincing enough that no one suspects the truth. Liam chuckled, shaking his head. That's vague, sweetheart, she exhaled. Fine, be affectionate, but not too affectionate, protective, but not suffocating, sweet but not fake. Liam's lips twitched. So you want me to be the perfect boyfriend? Emma hesitated. Perfect. A word she had been chasing her entire life, yet never quite reaching. Liam watched her for a moment before his voice softened. Why do I get the feeling that you've never had one before? Emma's breath hitched. She quickly looked away, picking up her clutch. We should go over the plan. Liam let out a low chuckle, but he didn't push. All right, he said, finishing his drink. Let's play house, sweetheart. The transformation. The next day, Emma found herself outside Liam's apartment. She wasn't entirely sure what she had been expecting. Some rundown place that reflected his carefree attitude, perhaps, but the loft was surprisingly clean. Minimalistic, masculine, and filled with little pieces of him. Books stacked against the walls, an old leather jacket tossed over a chair, a guitar resting in the corner. She wasn't sure why, but the sight of it unnerved her. Liam strolled out of the kitchen, coffee in hand, shirtless. Emma quickly turned away, heat creeping up her neck. Relax, sweetheart, Liam teased, taking a sip. If we're pretending to be in love, you might want to get used to seeing me like this. Emma clenched her jaw. Wear a shirt. Liam laughed, but he obliged, pulling on a fitted black t-shirt that did nothing to hide his broad shoulders. She handed him a file, full of details he needed to memorize about their relationship. Our story, she said, opening it. We met at a coffee shop. I was in a hurry, you accidentally spilled coffee on me, and then you spent the next 2 weeks trying to win me over. Liam smirked. Sounds about right. Emma shot him a look. We've been dating for 3 months. You work in finance. Liam interrupted, already bored. I read the file, sweetheart. Emma raised an eyebrow. Really? Then tell me, what's my favorite color? Liam leaned in, his eyes dancing with mischief. Red, like that dress you wore last night. Emma blinked. That wasn't in the file. How? Liam grinned. Because I pay attention. Her pulse skipped before she quickly looked away. We should practice. Liam arched an eyebrow. Practice what? Emma crossed her arms. Couple things, walking together, holding hands. How you're supposed to look at me. Liam chuckled. You want me to practice looking at you? Yes, she said stiffly. Liam shook his head, but then in a single moment, everything changed. His expression softened, the teasing gone. His lips parted slightly, as he took in her face, slowly, deeply, as if she was the only thing that existed in his world. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up to her eyes, and suddenly Emma felt like she couldn't breathe. Like this, Liam murmured. Emma's heartbeat pounded against her ribs. It was too much, too real. She swallowed. Yes, she whispered. Liam held her gaze for a moment longer, before finally stepping back, the corner of his mouth lifting into a knowing smirk. You might be in trouble, sweetheart, he murmured. Emma didn't respond, because for the first time, she realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a game anymore. And Liam Hayes was far too dangerous for her heart. An unexpected touch. Emma stood in front of her mirror, her fingers trembling slightly as she fastened the delicate chain of her necklace. Tonight was the first big test, a dinner party where she and Liam would have to convince everyone, including her sharp-eyed Aunt Margaret, that their relationship was real. Her reflection stared back at her, the deep emerald green dress hugging her figure a little too perfectly. It was elegant, but also daring. A part of her wasn't sure why she had chosen this particular dress. But when she imagined Liam seeing her in it, her stomach fluttered. A knock on her door made her jolt. Emma. Liam's voice was smooth as ever, but when she opened the door, his usual smirk vanished. His blue-gray eyes darkened as they roamed over her, taking in every inch, every curve, every detail of how the silky fabric clung to her body. For the first time since meeting him, Liam was speechless. Emma shifted uncomfortably. Is it too much? Liam exhaled slowly, as if forcing himself to regain control. He stepped closer, his voice lower. Sweetheart, if you wear that dress, I can't be held responsible for what happens tonight. A shiver ran down her spine. She rolled her eyes to mask the warmth creeping up her neck. You're supposed to act like my boyfriend, not a caveman. Liam smirked, but something in his gaze remained intense. Boyfriend or not, I'm still a man, he murmured. Emma's breath hitched, but before she could recover, Liam reached behind her. She stiffened when she felt his fingers brush against the skin of her bare back. A light touch, barely there, yet it sent a shiver through her. What are you doing? She whispered. Your necklace, he said, his voice close to her ear. It's not clasped properly. Emma's eyes fluttered shut for a brief second as his fingers expertly fastened it. When he pulled away, she released the breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Liam's smirk returned, but his voice was huskier than before. Now we're ready. Under watchful eyes, the dinner party was in full swing when they arrived. It was a lavish event, chandeliers casting golden light, the hum of polite conversation, and the clinking of expensive wine glasses. Emma's family was filled with successful, skeptical people. People who would pick up on the slightest hint of pretense. The moment they entered, heads turned. Emma felt the weight of her Aunt Margaret's gaze from across the room. Liam, however, was completely at ease. With one swift movement, he placed a possessive hand on the small of Emma's back, guiding her through the crowd with effortless confidence. She almost forgot to breathe. He leaned down slightly, whispering, "Relax, sweetheart. If you look that nervous, they'll figure it out in 2 seconds." Emma swallowed, forcing a smile. But then Liam did something unexpected. He lifted her hand to his lips, slow, deliberate, and pressed a feather-light kiss to her fingers. Emma's heart skipped a beat, and just like that, the room believed them. The jealousy game. As the evening wore on, Emma found herself both relieved and rattled. Liam was too good at this. He charmed her relatives effortlessly, laughing at their stories, answering questions about their relationship like he had known her for years. But then things took a turn. Across the room, a strikingly beautiful woman appeared, tall, blonde, and exuding wealth. Her gaze landed on Liam, and a slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. Emma's stomach twisted. "Liam?" she asked cautiously. Liam turned, and the second he saw the woman, His expression shifted, not quite shock, but something close. "Who's that?" Emma asked, her voice carefully neutral. Liam took a slow sip of his drink. "An old acquaintance." The woman wasted no time, making her way over, her eyes flicking to Emma, before settling on Liam. "Well, well," she purred, placing a hand on his chest, completely ignoring Emma. "I didn't expect to see you here." Emma felt something sharp twist inside her. Liam was hers, or at least he was supposed to be. She should have ignored it. She should have let Liam handle it. But instead, she acted on impulse. Emma stepped closer, wrapping her arm through Liam's, and resting her hand on his chest, exactly where the woman had touched him. Liam's body stiffened. The woman's smirk faltered slightly. Emma tilted her head, her voice sweet but lethal. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. I'm Liam's girlfriend." Liam let out a slow breath, and for a second Emma swore his grip on her waist tightened. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, before she forced a polite smile. "Oh, I see." After another moment, she excused herself, disappearing into the crowd. Emma sighed in relief, until she felt Liam's fingers lightly brush against her hip. When she looked up, his expression was unribbable. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured, his voice oddly soft. Emma swallowed, realizing her fingers were still resting against his chest. "I know," she whispered back. Neither of them moved. The air between them shifted, thick with something unspoken. Then Liam leaned down, his lips brushing dangerously close to her ear. "If you're going to be jealous, sweetheart," his voice was a husky murmur, "you should at least admit you enjoy having me as your boyfriend." Emma's pulse thundered. But before she could answer, he pulled away, his smirk returning. "Come on," he said. "Dance with me." And just like that, he led her onto the dance floor, leaving Emma with an entirely new problem. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if this was still just an act, a dangerous invitation. The moment Liam led her onto the dance floor, Emma felt her pulse quicken. The room seemed to fade, leaving only the soft melody of the music and the warmth of Liam's hand against her waist. His grip was firm but gentle, his touch leaving a trail of heat wherever it lingered. "This wasn't part of the plan," Emma murmured, glancing up at him. Liam's lips curled into a mischievous smirk. "What's wrong? Afraid you might actually enjoy it." Emma wanted to scoff, to roll her eyes, to brush off the way his presence set her nerves on fire. But then Liam pulled her closer, too close. Her breath hitched as her chest brushed against his, their bodies moving in sync to the slow, sensual rhythm of the music. The scent of his cologne, rich, dark, intoxicating, wrapped around her, making her momentarily forget why this was all just an act. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her thoughts in check. "Liam, people are watching." He tilted his head slightly, his voice deep and dangerously smooth. "Good. Let them watch." A moment of weakness, Emma knew she should pull away. She should remind herself that Liam was just playing a role, that his effortless charm and teasing words were all part of the deal. But in that moment, with his arms wrapped around her, and his breath warm against her temple, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Wanted, desirable, vulnerable. She exhaled shakily, gripping the fabric of his suit ever so slightly as they moved. Liam noticed. His fingers traced small, slow circles along the small of her back, barely there, but enough to send a shiver up her spine. Emma's heartbeat was erratic now. "Tell me something," Liam murmured, his lips hovering just above her ear. "Why did you really ask me to do this?" Emma stiffened. She looked up at him, but Liam's gaze was unreadable, intense, searching, almost too knowing. "For my aunt," she answered, her voice quieter than she intended, "to stop her from forcing me into another disaster of a blind date." Liam hummed, unconvinced. "And that's all?" Emma hesitated. A part of her wanted to say yes, to laugh it off, but another part of her, the part that had been affected by his touch, by his presence, wasn't so sure anymore. Instead of answering, she looked away. Liam's smirk returned, but this time, it wasn't playful, it was knowing. "You're a terrible liar, sweetheart," he whispered. Her stomach twisted, and then he did something she wasn't prepared for. He lifted her hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a slow, lingering kiss to her knuckles. Emma stilled. Heat bloomed across her skin, and for the briefest second, she forgot they were standing in a crowded room, surrounded by people who were supposed to believe their story. Because right now, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt real. Or the arrival of trouble. Just as the tension between them reached an unbearable high, a voice interrupted them. Emma, she turned sharply, her stomach sinking as she saw Daniel, her ex, the man who had walked away from her when she needed him the most. Her entire body tensed, old wounds threatening to resurface. Liam, however, remained completely calm. His arm around Emma's waist tightened slightly, his thumb brushing slow, deliberate circles against her hip. A silent reassurance. Daniel's eyes flickered between them, his lips pressing into a thin line. Didn't expect to see you here. Emma forced herself to stay composed. It's a family event. Why wouldn't I be here? Daniel's gaze shifted to Liam, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. And this must be the boyfriend I've heard about. Liam didn't flinch. He smiled. A slow, confident smile that only seemed to irritate Daniel further. Liam Carter, he said smoothly, extending his hand. Nice to meet you. Daniel ignored it. How long have you two been together? Emma hesitated, for the briefest second, but Liam didn't miss a beat. 6 months, he answered, his tone dripping with certainty. Best 6 months of my life, actually. Emma's breath caught. Daniel scoffed. That's funny. Because last I checked, Emma wasn't interested in a serious relationship. Liam tilted his head slightly, his smirk never faltering. Well, maybe that's because she was waiting for the right man. Emma's heart flipped. Daniel's jaw ticked, his frustration evident. Emma should have felt smug, should have enjoyed seeing her ex uncomfortable, but all she could focus on was the heat in Liam's gaze as he looked at her. Like he meant every word. Like he wasn't just playing a role anymore. The kiss that changed everything. Daniel let out a humorless laugh. Right, and I suppose you two are just madly in love. Emma knew it was coming before it even happened. Liam turned to her, his expression shifting from teasing to something more intense. Madly, he murmured. And before she could process what he was doing, Liam tilted her chin up and captured her lips in a kiss. A real kiss, not just for show, not just for their audience, but a kiss that sent electricity surging through her veins, that made the entire room fade away. Emma's fingers instinctively gripped his suit, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. Liam's hand slid to the back of her neck, pulling her deeper, as if he wasn't just proving something to Daniel, he was proving something to himself. And Emma? She let him. Because in that moment, she wasn't sure where the act ended and the truth began. A heartbeat too late, Emma's mind was spinning. The warmth of Liam's lips still lingered on hers, the taste of something dangerous and addictive flooding her senses. For a second, just one dizzying, intoxicating second, she forgot why they were even here. Forgot about Daniel, forgot that this was all supposed to be an act. All she knew was that Liam's arms were still wrapped around her, his breath warm against her skin, his eyes searching hers as if waiting for something, say something, but she couldn't. She was too overwhelmed. Liam had kissed her before she even had time to think, and worse, she had kissed him back. Not because she had to, not because of their deal, but because in that fleeting moment, she wanted to, and that realization terrified her. Daniel's reaction, and Liam's bold move, a low chuckle pulled her back to reality. Daniel, he was standing there, arms crossed, amusement flickering in his gaze. Well, that was quite the performance, he said, his tone filled with disbelief, almost convincing. Emma's stomach twisted. Her ex was doubting her, doubting them. Liam must have sensed her hesitation because he tightened his grip on her waist, his hold possessive, protective. There's nothing almost about it, Liam said smoothly, and then he turned to Emma. Her breath hitched as he tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. He was close, Too close. Tell me, sweetheart, Liam murmured, his deep voice caressing her skin like velvet. Was that just for show? Emma's throat went dry. He was testing her. She could feel the weight of Daniel's gaze burning into her, waiting for her to mess up, to hesitate, to break the illusion. But Liam, he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room, like he already knew the answer. Emma swallowed hard. She knew she had to say something, do something, before Daniel called her bluff. So she did the only thing she could think of. She lifted herself onto her toes and kissed Liam again. It was supposed to be a quick, simple kiss, but the moment their lips met, she felt him respond. His arms tightened around her, pulling her against him like she belonged there, like he had been waiting for her to do this. A quiet gasp escaped her lips as his hand slid to the small of her back, his touch firm, steady, intoxicating. He wasn't faking it, neither of them were. And that scared her more than anything. A silent war of emotions. When she finally pulled away, Liam's gaze darkened. His jaw was tense, his breathing slightly uneven, and Emma, her heart was slamming against her ribs. Daniel scoffed, but Emma barely heard him, because Liam was still looking at her like that, like she had just changed everything, like she had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She stepped back, her body trembling slightly. I should go find my aunt. Liam didn't stop her, but as she turned to leave, his voice followed her, quiet but laced with something dangerous. This isn't over, Emma. Her breath caught, because she knew he wasn't talking about their deal. He was talking about them, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Aunt Margaret's suspicion. Emma barely made it through the rest of the night. Her heart was still racing, her lips still tingling, her mind a mess of emotions she didn't want to admit. When she finally found Aunt Margaret, the older woman was watching her closely. So her aunt said, sipping her champagne, "You and Liam seem comfortable together." Emma forced a nervous smile. "Well, of course. Don't lie to me, dear." Emma froze. Aunt Margaret's gaze was sharp, knowing, I've been around long enough to recognize real attraction when I see it. Emma's stomach flipped. She tried to brush it off. It's just chemistry. Aunt Margaret chuckled. Chemistry, my dear, is the first sign of something much deeper. Emma's pulse quickened. Was this really just an act anymore? Or was Liam already starting to break through the walls she had spent years building? Liam's confession, the night that changed everything. Emma left the party feeling exhausted, physically and emotionally. She thought she was finally alone, free to sort through the mess of emotions Liam had stirred inside her. But when she opened the door to her apartment, she found him already waiting for her. Liam, sitting on her couch, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes dark and unreadable. "How did you get in?" she asked, her heart pounding. He smirked, holding up a spare key. "You gave this to me, remember?" Emma's breath hitched. She had completely forgotten. Liam stood, taking a slow step toward her. "We need to talk." Emma backed up instinctively. "Liam, tonight was real," he cut in, his voice firm, unwavering. Emma's stomach twisted. "No, it wasn't." He reached out, tilting her chin up, forcing her to look at him. "Then why did you kiss me back?" Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer. Liam's gaze softened, but his voice was still low and intense. "I know you're scared, Emma." His thumb brushed against her lower lip, sending shivers down her spine. "But tell me something." Emma swallowed hard. "What?" Liam leaned in, his breath warm against her skin. "If I kissed you again right now, would you still say it's fake?" Emma's pulse skipped a beat. She knew the answer, and she knew Liam did too. A heart that won't listen. Emma stood frozen. Liam's words still echoed in her mind. "If I kissed you again right now, would you still say it's fake?" Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Liam was standing just inches away, his gaze locked onto hers, daring her to admit the truth. to stop hiding behind this pretend relationship. But how could she? How could she tell him that the way he made her feel was too real, too intense, too dangerous? So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She lied. "This is still fake, Liam," she whispered, forcing herself to step back, to put distance between them. "We're just pretending, that's all." A flicker of something painful crossed his face, but it disappeared just as quickly. Liam exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw as if trying to control himself. "Right," he said, voice tight, "just pretending." Emma hated the way her chest ached at the look in his eyes. But before she could say anything else, Liam let out a soft, bitter chuckle. "You know what's funny?" he murmured. Emma swallowed. "What?" Liam took a step closer, his voice low but intense. "I never meant for this to feel real." Her breath hitched. "But it does, doesn't it?" he continued, his eyes searching hers. "For both of us." Emma shook her head, her throat tight. "No, it doesn't." Liam smiled, but it wasn't his usual teasing smirk, it was sad. "Then why are you shaking?" Emma realized, to her horror, that he was right. Her hands were trembling. Her breath was uneven, and her entire body was on edge, as if it already knew something her mind refused to accept. Liam took another step forward, and suddenly, she was against the wall, trapped between the cool surface behind her and the warmth of his body in front of her. "Say it again," he murmured, leaning in just enough for his breath to brush against her lips. "Tell me this is fake. Look me in the eye, and tell me that when I kissed you tonight, you didn't feel anything." Emma tried, she really did, but the words wouldn't come. And Liam knew it. He reached up, his fingers brushing against her cheek, tilting her face toward his. His touch was so gentle, so painfully intimate, that she felt something in her chest crack open. "I'm falling for you, Emma," he whispered, her entire world tilted. No, no, he wasn't supposed to say that. This wasn't supposed to happen, but Liam wasn't done. "And I think you're falling for me too." Emma sucked in a sharp breath. She was losing this battle, badly, and Liam was watching her like he already knew he had won. Running from the truth, Emma did the only thing she could think of. She pushed past him, and practically ran to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Her heart was racing, her entire body trembling from the weight of what had just happened. Liam had just told her he was falling for her, and the worst part, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this wasn't just some act anymore, that Liam's touch, his kiss, his words, they were real. But how could they be? He was the kind of man who could have any woman he wanted. And she was just a woman who had paid him to be something he wasn't. Tears burned behind her eyes as she slid down to the floor, burying her face in her hands. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let herself fall for him, because if she did, she would be the one left broken. Liam's struggle. Liam stood outside her door for a long time. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight. He had seen the fear in Emma's eyes, not fear of him, fear of her own feelings, and for the first time in his life, Liam felt helpless. He had always been confident, always known how to handle women, how to keep things light, fun, casual. But with Emma, nothing about this felt casual, nothing about this felt like a game anymore. And that scared him, because he knew one thing for sure. He wanted Emma, not just for pretend, not just for a few stolen moments. He wanted all of her, but she wasn't ready to accept that yet. So he did the hardest thing he had ever done. He walked away, for now. A night of sleepless thoughts. Emma barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel Liam's touch, hear his voice, see the way he looked at her. And worst of all, she could still feel the ghost of his lips against hers. By the time morning came, she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She thought about avoiding him, pretending like last night never happened. But when she stepped into the living room, Liam was already there, sitting on her couch, coffee in hand, watching her. He didn't say anything, he just raised an eyebrow and gestured to the cup sitting next to him. For you, he said simply. Emma hesitated. Then without a word, she walked over, picked up the cup, and took a sip. It was exactly how she liked it. Her chest tightened. Liam had paid attention. He had remembered. And that small simple act shattered her defenses even more. Because this man, this infuriating, cocky, irresistible man, was making it very, very hard for her to keep pretending. A morning of tension and unspoken words. Emma sipped her coffee, the warmth of the mug comforting against her shaky hands. Liam sat across from her, his eyes unreadable. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with everything they weren't saying. Emma's mind was a chaotic mess. Last night had changed everything. Liam had told her he was falling for her, and instead of admitting her own feelings, she had run away. But now sitting across from him, in the quiet morning light, she could feel the weight of what she had done. She had hurt him. She had seen it in his eyes last night, the flicker of pain before he had walked away. And the truth was, she had hurt herself too. Because every second she spent pushing him away felt like she was ripping her own heart apart. Liam finally broke the silence. Are we going to talk about last night? Emma's grip on her coffee tightened. She wasn't ready for this conversation. But Liam was done waiting. Emma, he said, his voice softer now. You can't keep pretending this doesn't mean anything. She swallowed hard, staring down at her coffee. I don't know what you want me to say. Liam sighed, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I want you to tell me the truth. Emma's heart pounded, because the truth was that she had fallen for him. Hard, but she couldn't say it, because if she did, if she admitted it out loud, she would be giving him the power to break her. And that terrified her. The dance of distance and desire. Liam could see the battle going on inside her. The way her fingers trembled slightly as she held her cup, the way she refused to meet his gaze. The way she kept running, even when there was nowhere left to go. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to lean back, to give her space, even though every part of him wanted to pull her closer. All right, he said, voice calm but firm. If you don't want to talk about it, I won't push you. Emma blinked, surprised. That was it, no arguing. No pressing for answers. Just like that, he was letting it go. Liam set his cup down, and stood up. But just so we're clear, Emma, she looked up at him, and when she did, her breath caught. Because Liam's eyes, those dark intense eyes, were filled with undeniable certainty. I'm not walking away, he said simply. Her heart stumbled. I know you're scared, he continued, his voice deep and steady, and I know you think pushing me away will make it easier. But I'm still here. Emma's throat went dry. Liam took a slow step closer, closing the distance between them. I won't force you to say anything you're not ready to say, he murmured. But I need you to understand something. Emma's pulse raced as he leaned down, his face inches from hers. This isn't just an act for me anymore. He whispered. It hasn't been for a long time. Then before she could react, before she could even breathe, Liam reached out and brushed his thumb against her lips. The touch was feather-light, barely there, but it was enough to send a shiver down Emma's spine. Her lips parted, and Liam's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to her mouth. For a single endless moment, the world disappeared. It was just them. The air charged with something too powerful to ignore. Liam's hand lingered on her jaw for a second longer before he finally pulled away, his touch leaving a trail of fire on her skin. I'll see you tonight, he said, his voice rough, and just like that, he was gone. Emma was left standing there, her heart pounding, her breath shaky, her body aching from the absence of his touch, and she knew. She was losing this fight, fast, the breaking point. Emma spent the entire day trying to distract herself. She cleaned, she worked, She did everything she could to ignore the way Liam had looked at her this morning. But nothing helped, because no matter how hard she tried to push it away, one truth remained: she wanted him. She needed him, and the more she denied it, the more it hurt. By the time evening rolled around, Emma was exhausted. She had just stepped out of the shower when she heard a knock at the door. Her heart stuttered. She already knew who it was. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Liam stood there, his hair slightly damp, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, revealing just a hint of his toned chest. Emma's mouth went dry. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey," she whispered back. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then finally Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't going to do this," he muttered. "I told myself I'd wait, that I'd give you time." Emma's heart skipped. "But I can't," he admitted, stepping closer. "I can't pretend like I don't want you anymore." "Emma," her breath hitched. Liam reached up, gently tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, his touch sending sparks shooting through her veins. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. Emma's lips parted, but no sound came out, because she didn't want him to stop. She wanted him closer. She wanted him now. Liam's eyes searched hers, waiting for permission, for a single sign that she wanted this too. And then she broke. Emma grabbed his shirt and pulled him down, her lips crashing into his, with a desperation she could no longer deny. Liam made a sound deep in his throat, something between a groan and a sigh of relief, before his arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against him. The kiss was hungry, urgent, filled with weeks of pent-up longing. Liam's hands gripped her waist, lifting her slightly as he deepened the kiss, as if he couldn't get close enough. Emma's fingers tangled in his hair, her entire body melting against his, and in that moment, she knew. This wasn't pretend, this was real, this was everything. A kiss that changed everything. The world around them disappeared. There was no past, no future, just this. Emma in Liam's arms, his lips moving against hers, with a passion that stole her breath. Her heart thundered in her chest, as Liam deepened the kiss, his hands firm yet gentle, as they held her close. She could feel the warmth of his body, the strength in the way he wrapped around her, as if he was afraid to let go. And for the first time in her life, Emma let herself surrender. She didn't think, she didn't analyze, she just felt. Liam's fingers brushed over her cheek, his touch soft, reverent, as if she was something precious. A shiver ran down her spine when his lips left hers and traveled down her jaw, pressing slow, lingering kisses that made her body tremble. Her breath hitched. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely there. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm against her skin. His eyes, dark with undeniable emotion, held her captive. "Tell me you feel this too," he murmured. "Tell me I'm not the only one losing my mind over you." Emma swallowed hard, her fingers still clutching the front of his shirt. She felt everything. Every touch, every glance, every moment they had shared. It was too real, too much, too terrifying. But before she could say anything, before she could fully let go of her fears, a harsh knock on the door shattered the moment. Emma jerked away, her chest heaving, as reality crashed back. Liam let out a frustrated sigh, raking a hand through his hair. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. Emma's stomach twisted. Who could it be at this hour? She took a shaky breath and walked to the door, her pulse still erratic from the kiss. When she opened it, her heart stopped. A ghost from the past, standing in the doorway, was Brandon. Her ex, the man who had shattered her trust, leaving her scarred and afraid to love again. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she took a step back, memories rushing in, like a tidal wave. "Emma," Brandon said smoothly, his voice laced with the same fake charm she had once fallen for. Long time, no see. Emma's fingers curled into fists. She wasn't the same naive girl he had once manipulated, and yet, the sight of him, the sheer audacity of him, showing up like this, made her knees feel weak. Liam's presence suddenly loomed behind her, his voice low and dangerous. "Who the hell are you?" Brandon's gaze flicked to Liam, his smirk faltering for just a second before he recovered. "I'm Emma's fiancé," he said smoothly. The room spun. "What?" Liam's voice was sharp, edged with something dangerous. Emma's chest tightened, her breath shallow. Brandon chuckled, stepping inside without permission. "We were engaged, weren't we, sweetheart?" Liam's entire body tensed beside her. Emma felt the heat of his anger, the rigidness in his posture, but she didn't want Liam to fight her battles. She squared her shoulders, lifting her chin. "That was a long time ago," she said coldly. "Before I found out what kind of person you really are." Brandon let out a laugh, shaking his head. "Come on, Emma, you don't seriously think this?" He gestured to Liam, with a smirk. "Is real, do you?" Emma's throat tightened, because wasn't that the very question she had been asking herself? What was real? Her deal with Liam had started as an act, a performance, but along the way, she had fallen hard. Brandon leaned closer, dropping his voice. "Emma, you and I both know men like him don't stay. Whatever this is, it's temporary." Liam stiffened beside her, his jaw clenching. But Emma, she wasn't the girl who had once believed Brandon's lies. She wasn't weak anymore. She turned to face Liam, her heart hammering in her chest, and in that moment, she knew the answer. She had spent so much time running, doubting, afraid of love, but Liam was different, because when she had pushed, he hadn't left. When she had been scared, he had stayed. And now, standing between the man who had broken her and the man who had pieced her back together, the choice was crystal clear. Emma took Liam's hand, gripping it tightly, and when she turned to Brandon, her voice was steady, unshakable. "You're wrong," she said, "because this is real." Liam's breath caught. He hadn't expected her to say it, but as she squeezed his hand, as she met his gaze with absolute certainty, he knew she had chosen him. Brandon's face darkened, his smirk finally fading, and with that he turned and left. The moment the door clicked shut, Emma let out a shaky breath, and then she felt Liam's hands on her shoulders, turning her to face him. His eyes searched hers, filled with something undeniable. "Say it again," he whispered. Emma's pulse raced. "What?" Liam swallowed hard, his grip tightening, ever so slightly. "That this is real." She looked up at him, at the man who had been her fake boyfriend, her protector, her everything, and she realized she didn't want to pretend anymore. With a soft smile, Emma reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "It's real," she whispered. "You're real, and I." Her voice caught, but she forced herself to say the words. "I love you." Liam let out a shaky breath, his forehead dropping against hers, and then he kissed her. Not with urgency, not with desperation, but with pure raw emotion, a kiss filled with every unspoken promise, every moment of longing, every bit of love, and for the first time, Emma wasn't afraid, because she had found something worth fighting for, and she wasn't letting go. Not now, not ever.